Well, hello there and welcome in. There
Hey
she is.
everybody. Here I are. Here I are. It's one of those days. One of those days trying to get everything together. Welcome everybody to the show. And do you have any thoughts before we go and dive in, Mr. Briggs? Oops.
Coming to you live somewhere from Kentucky. Getting ready to pull out of a Love's truck stop here, but I'm in the passenger seat. And
Yeah.
for all of you that haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Hit the notification button and share. Um, all that crazy jazz. So that'll probably get repeated again, but I just want to.
Yes. Yeah. We'll definitely repeat. So we see Linda here. Leonard said hello tonight as well. So it's good to see you as well, Linda. Thanks for joining us. So
Yes, Linda. Appreciate you.
should we go ahead and dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. So welcome everybody to Deservingly You. Here we are again. We're so glad to have you here. And as many of you know, this is that space where we talk about what it takes to rebuild a life after high controlled environments and how we can start to live self-led lives instead of being managed. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shannon Avery Briggs. I'm an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and I'm a certified transformational resilience coach, co-founder of Luminous Connections and the Exit Generation.
I'm John Briggs right here alongside with Shannon, also an XJW transformational resilience coach as well, certified, and co-founder as well, along with her. And yeah, last week we talked about why healing can feel like betrayal, right? Remember that? And how the love was real even when the trap was built on top of it. Okay, somewhere that can feel very sensitive for some, and we're calling it grieving people who are still alive. Okay, ambiguous loss after making our exit.
Yeah. So before we dive into this, just a quick heads up. Tonight touches on real loss. And at one point, we're actually going to be touching on some of those darker places that this kind of grief can pull you into. So if that's not where you can go tonight safely, that's okay. Please make sure that you are taking care of yourself first. We're going to be here next week too. So if you are, let us know where you're joining us from. And here, I'm in Maricopa. It's 105 degrees here. Like John said, he's in Kentucky. So where's everybody else at? And let us know too if you are watching on the replay. Let us know where you're watching that from too. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Let's do this. Oh, goodness.
A little bouncy there. So we always want to set the space. But before we go any further, what supports this space is to be able to have agreements and, among ourselves, that this is a space for reflection and not reaction. And we definitely want to use our curiosity over that judgment. Oh, and Johnny, you're muted, honey.
Oh,
There we
thank
go.
you.
Yep.
A lot going on here. I got a fly flying around me.
Get serious. What heavy stuff to talk about?
I know. Well, I mentioned before, tonight may feel heavier than other times, other weeks and things that we've covered. And we're talking about loss that often, it doesn't come with closure or that sense of some sort of ending. And if you need to step away at any point, that's not failing. This is, or failing yourself. It's just that's listening to your body and what you need, at any given time.
Yeah, we want this to be your authentic space, and whatever you're carrying in with you tonight, carry it in exactly as it is. We do invite you to consider how you want to move forward from here. That's one of the things that helped us with, along with our journey, is not just staying in one spot, but actually let's get curious about how we can move forward.
Right. We also invite you to use the chat. Group learning can be very powerful. We learn from each other and have those aha moments. We do want you to stay focused on we want to stay focused on ourselves and what we might be learning from what comes out of that. And or if you don't want to you don't have to share out loud to be part of this either. You can just notice what's happening in your body as we go along.
Yeah. So, and if listening is all that you can do, that's good as well. It's enough. That can be participating. And once again, if this topic tonight gets too difficult, please, please, please pause and step away. Take care of yourself. We know that this can be extremely difficult. So before we dive into the tough stuff, though, we do want to take a look at where we are on the path. And so we've got, we wanted to give you an update on the contest, and then we'll dive into the heavier stuff. So as you guys all know, John and I are in a competition for America's Favorite Couple. And if we're given that platform, we want to use it exactly what we've been talking about all along, is being able to help more people leaving high controlled environments. And we believe that having the variety feature in the magazine would help us to share the Exit Generation's vision with a much bigger audience and help us to share information about the nonprofits that support the people who are leaving. And so also, if you're a part of a nonprofit that supports this work, please reach out to us, because we have a couple of initiatives that we are starting to put the pieces together and want to get them rolling and working on. And if you do feel moved to vote, we'd be so grateful. And if not, there's no pressure at all. Just being with us tonight is enough. So a quick orientation too, we're still in phase 2 of the exit paths, allow that grief. And we've been looking at grief from many different perspectives, and as well as your interaction with that grief. And one of the things that's important about grief is that we want to make sure that we don't stay in the grief. So this, like the phase is called allow the grief, because allowing is actually active and it's purposeful. It has a direction. And so if we stay in the grief, we can invite more pain and suffering, and that can even have an effect on our health. And we definitely don't want that.
Yeah, especially tonight, because tonight's grief doesn't have an ending built into the way that some others may have, right? There's something else worth naming here today too. Today is July 26th, and it's the Watchtower Victims Memorial Day. Since 2014, former Jehovah's Witnesses around the world have used this day to grieve people still inside, right? And that are still alive, but still just unreachable.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah. And believe it or not, we did not plan this subject this way. We didn't know about the date. We say that the universe helped us. We actually scheduled tonight's topic weeks and weeks ago. And it wasn't until I saw Monica's video from stopmandatedshunning.org that where she shared what July 26th was and how it was used to honor those that we've lost in this way. So tonight's topic just seemed to align itself perfectly with this. So here's what we hope that you'll leave with tonight and what we're building towards. So there are 4 things. A name for what you've been feeling. Many people carry this loss for years without hearing a term for it. It's just really, really confusing. And they even feel lost while they're in that. And I know for me, I felt so lost. And tonight we're going to talk about that.
and an understanding of why this hits different. Other grief, gets to end, or you get some closure on the end of it. So this one doesn't come with an edge to it. So your mind keeps working, like it's a problem that was never going to resolve, right? So an actual mechanism with no ending in sight, our mind's stuck just trying to solve something that's unsolvable, you can say.
Yeah. And we do want to share a few ideas and tools that you can reach for if or when this type of grief comes into your life. And when you can understand what's happening, then processing it can feel more manageable. I know that has definitely helped me along my journey, is being able to have that understanding.
And then the last one there that you can see is learning to do this can help us keep our hope alive and honoring the boundaries while keeping the love. And it can help us from turning bitter and assigning responsibility to the appropriate places.
Yeah. So I want to pause here once again for a second, because we're going to be talking about some very sensitive topics. So I'm going to say again, please take care of yourself, whatever that looks like for you. Navigating relationships, especially when you're coming out of the organization, can be so tricky. We see so many who live a lie as an attempt to salvage those relationships. And, I felt very, very fortunate. My daughter and I had an agreement that we wouldn't discuss religion. And I did my very best. I would even adjust my social media posts so that I'd make sure that they wouldn't go to her in hopes that she would not see him and would not be offended. We were texting normally, warm, hearts back and forth, love yous, pictures, pet stories, sunsets, all of that kind of stuff, that kind of exchange that makes you feel like everything is fine in the morning. And then that night there's a letter. And it felt like it hit out of the blue. No specific moment was named and no incident that I could point to, just categories of accumulated hurt and years of patterns and a boundary, and then immediately no contact. And, when I did get it, I reacted. And I ended up writing her back immediately after I read that letter. And then I unsent it. And it's not because I didn't mean what I was sending to her, but because she had asked for space. And honoring that had to matter more than my need to say something back. And so many of you may recognize this tactic, or even if your story may sound nothing like mine, or maybe it looks very similar. It can come without a warning. Like there's this lightning bolt that hit of it, and that shock detonates your body before your mind can catch up, and you can't breathe, and there's no air. I'm not going to pretend that shock stayed abstract for me. That night brought on the pain that was so loud, I just wanted it to stop. I wanted to be done feeling that altogether. And I couldn't imagine moving forward without that pain in my life. I want to say that really clearly, because I'm also not going to sit here and pretend that those dark thoughts never showed up. Because if it's shown up for you too, I don't want you carrying that alone and thinking it makes you weak or broken or the only one. It doesn't make you any of those things.
And it makes you someone who got hit by something that actually is that big, right? Makes sense. So I'm going to keep my camera off for a little while just because it's jumping all over the place.
Okay.
But I'm here.
So, then you get to that moment and the emptiness hits, that aloneness, and it's like the room shrinks around you, and you yearn and you search for comfort and reach out to the people. I reached out to the people that I thought could understand. And it wasn't until that moment that I could actually feel it in my body, where the people I thought could understand either couldn't or they chose not to. And, that understanding of shunning hit me at a new perspective. I'd experienced it before with my sisters, and we've been around shunning most of our lives and even been on the other side of it. And we've learned so much, though, since we've been out, John and I. But understanding this in my head and feeling it land at this level in my body were completely different things. And so, standing there alone and holding something that most people never had to experience is, something that happens in those moments. And so that first night, I made it through barely. I tossed and turned, and I probably fell asleep about 3:00 in the morning, and then had to be up with the dogs by 5:30. And the air still felt thin, and it was really difficult to breathe. And I felt like I had a hangover that next morning, headachy and foggy and raw, even though, I hadn't had anything to drink the night before. But my body spent everything that it had the night before. And that's when that undertow began. The emotions start swirling all over the place, and anger and resentment, and that sense of desperation poking its head up again. And that grief cycle just going into high gear. And how we're telling you how to pay attention and listen to your body. Sure enough, grief showed up in mine. I ended up developing this cough that wouldn't clear up. And I have this book that'll line up the emotions with the body and how we can release them, and how some of the emotional connections to the lungs are abandonment and rejection. And so understanding things like that are, the way that our bodies work this way, and the grief cycle and the emotional and the physical connection, that helped me work through this period.
Yeah, that can be so powerful, your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do when the ground disappears like from under you without any sort of warning. Another thing that helps is really understanding what this is as a whole, and what is going on here.
Yeah. John said that, that shunning is pain, and it is very, very painful. But one of the things is, like, if we can start learning what's going on in our bodies, then, like we said earlier, we can help identify what can help us to move forward.
Shannon, I lost my screen.
Okay, so what exactly is ambiguous loss? It's actually, psychologists call it that. And this researcher named Pauline Boss coined the term actually back in the 1970s. She was originally studying families of soldiers who went missing in action, and they were present in every way that mattered, but there was no confirmation of where they were or whether they were going to come back. There wasn't any body, they didn't have a funeral, or no way to close the loop. And so what she found was that grief actually had two forms that most people never learn to tell apart. There's that kind that we all recognize, when someone's gone and everybody agrees that they're gone, and that grief is awful, but it has that edge to it that can help us to move towards closure. And then there's this other kind, where the person is still out there and they're still breathing, just psychologically absent and unreachable and gone from your life without being gone from the world. And what she found was that this second kind actually shows up in shunning, in dementia, in addiction, in any situation where somebody's present enough that you can't fully grieve them, but absent enough that you can't have them either. And so that ends up being the trap of it. You know, your mind can't close that file that it doesn't have the permission to close. And so in a way, it's like some losses will actually come with a funeral, a date, a casserole, you know, a card, but this ambiguous loss doesn't do that. And here's the part that can be specific to many that are watching. You know, ambiguous loss on its own is hard enough. But when it's happening after high control environments, it doesn't arrive by itself. It actually comes with extra weight already attached to it, you know, and weight that most people grieving a living, unreachable person never have to carry. So, you know, if you think about somebody grieving a parent with dementia or a family whose son is missing overseas, you know, their community rallies around them. You know, they may get food brought to them and people ask how they're doing and actually mean it. But then think about what happens when the reason that somebody is unreachable is that religious system taught them that cutting you off was actually an act of love. You know, there's no meal and no one's asking you how you're holding up, because most people don't even know, you know, to call it a loss. And some people may even blame you. I know I experienced that. I got the blame. And it's not just that the outside world doesn't recognize it. The loss itself can get rewritten from the inside, right? That community that shaped your whole identity doesn't just go quiet. It actually issues that verdict on who you are now. And so communication doesn't fade. It just stops all at once. You know, so there's no closure, no real understanding, just that silence where the relationship used to be. And so what looked like unconditional love turns out to have had conditions built into it the whole entire time. You know, there were rules that only ever ran in one direction. And then there's the loss itself that's unrecognizable to almost everybody around you because that person is still alive. And so what are you grieving, they may wonder. You know, and it ends up being everything. We'll see if Johnny ends up coming back to us. So, but there's been many times on my journey where I've been reminded and have had that aha moment, you know, that being a coach doesn't exempt you from the work that's required for the journey. I remember having a conversation with another coach where we discussed this, and we both knew it. We agreed that this pain and the work sometimes absolutely frickin' sucks. And, you know, there's also a version of this that people expect, that the training somehow ends up building a wall between you and the thing that you're teaching about. You know, like knowing the map means that you don't have to walk the road, but it doesn't work that way. You know, the training doesn't give us a pass out of the experience. If anything, it helps us to recognize what's happening to you while it's happening, which isn't the same as it hurting less. And for me personally, what it actually brought me wasn't a detour or an easier road, but I can say that it ended up being a shorter distance between the pain hitting and me knowing what to do with it. And I didn't have to spend weeks wondering if something was wrong with me or telling me I should be handling this better, or I knew what I was looking at almost immediately. And that's not nothing. It's worth noting. That knowledge continues to help me to build that trust in my own perception. And that trust ends up building into empowerment. And so both of those together can help us live more self-led lives. Is this resonating with folks? Does this make sense? Let us know in the chat. So when this shock of the grief, when it detonates, what do you actually reach for? What can help?
All right, I'm back.
All right.
I had to download the entire file again.
Tell us.
Well, there's a concept in trauma work called titration. It comes from chemistry. Did I pronounce that wrong?
Titration.
Titration, okay. It comes from chemistry. See, originally adding something slowly, drop by drop, instead of all at once, so you don't overwhelm the system that you're working with. Therapists borrowed this word from a similar idea, right? Instead of having someone sit with their full grief or trauma all at once, which can overwhelm the nervous system and actually cause more harm, you help them approach it in small, manageable doses. A few minutes of feeling it and stepping back, touch it, retreat, touch it again. And then over time, the person can handle larger and larger amounts without getting flooded or completely shutting down.
Yeah. So that's what every idea that we're about to give you is actually doing. It's not making the grief smaller. It actually gives you a way to meet it in those pieces instead of all at once. You know, if you journal, it can help it get out of your body and onto the page, and you can feel it without drowning in it. And here's why the page specifically works, because grief that stays only in your head will end up doing that loop thing. And so, you know, it might be the same three thoughts over and over, and there's no exit. So that page actually gives it somewhere to go that isn't just around and around and around and around inside you. And so once it's written down, your mind doesn't have to keep track of it, and it doesn't have to keep holding on to it to make sure that it doesn't disappear.
Now you can let nature hold some of it, right? A sunset, a sunrise, perhaps a walk. The world is still here, and so are you. Mm-hmm. And that one isn't just a nice idea. See, your body regulates itself against rhythm, and nature is full of that. Tides, light, right? Changing, things changing all around you, in your own footsteps. And grief throws your whole system into chaos. Something steady and repeating outside of you can actually help something steady come back online inside of you.
There is definitely something with hugging a tree. So another thing is allowing the music to be a container. So I know this is what I have done over and over and over the years. And when I got this letter, that there was a song that helped me, to work through it. And so I found that song. And when you do that, a song that holds the feeling that you can't say out loud. And I let it do its job. And, sometimes there aren't words yet for what you're carrying. And a song can hold that shape of a feeling before you have the language for it. Now, this doesn't mean that you're avoiding it by any means. It's borrowing a container until you can build your own. And I even find that there might be songs that don't have words, but it brings up those emotions that can help me to be able to release them.
And then also, try to be intentional about who you tell. Ask yourself, what outcome do I want here? Yeah. Not everyone can hold this with you, but know what's there for you. Know what's in your tool box, so to speak. A community, a safe person, a trusted coach.
Yeah. And if the bottom drops further than what you expected, 988 is there. And you may never need it, but know it anyway, because those are the moments that when it gets the darkest, that it can be difficult, and it can be difficult to even reach out to the people that you believe that you trust and stuff. And so that's why that is set up for that. And I know for me, when I was experiencing this and going through this on my own journey, with the loss of my daughter, was like really figuring out, who I did want to reach out to. And so I have those people in that we've built in our personal community that we kind of know who to go to. There was a network when we were going through our coaching, our certification and stuff. So there were people in there that I knew that were just so supportive and stuff. And so I reached out to them. I reached out to my siblings that were non-XJWs, but they still, it was interesting how those long fingers of the indoctrination, even though they were not part of the organization, there was some level of protection that they still had for the organization, even though they had never been part of it. So really, really being aware and intentional, like John said, about who you have these conversations with and who you cover it with. And that's also why we ended up developing the breakouts for Mondays, so that we could start building that type of a community to have those safe conversations with. So if you remember too, we told you at the top of the hour that you can honor the boundary and keep the love, and you can have both of those at once. And so here's some of the ideas of what that could look like.
There's an idea there that in grief research called continuing bonds. For a long time, the standard belief was that healthy grieving meant letting go completely, but or cutting the emotional tie so you could move on. Research puts back on that pretty hard, and it turns out maintaining a bond with someone that you've lost, even someone who's died, isn't a sign that you're stuck. It's actually one of the healthy ways that people cope.
Yeah. And if that's true for somebody who's died, it's definitely true here. You're not required to sever the love to respect the boundary. The two aren't in conflict from one another. And the letters to you, that the reason that this works isn't really about the words on the page. It's that the relationship doesn't have to go completely silent just because the conversation did. You can stay in it. You're the one, you're the one that's narrating it right now. And then heart math texts. This one actually works on your body directly and not just your feelings. So and if anybody ever wants to learn more about heart math, I'm a heart math coach as well. And so with heart math, I'll just give a little bit of kind of what you do. So you can focus on your heart and do that heart-centered breathing. So envision that you're breathing through your heart. And what this does is it actually shifts your nervous system. And so the old habit, so what I have a reminder on my phone that I used to text my daughter, and so what I do with that is that's a reminder to check in. And it doesn't have to be something that's painful. It actually ends up becoming a physical practice for me that happens to be where I take and I aim those thoughts to her. And I envision, the messages coming from my heart and reaching her. And then something, we might choose to have something worn or something permanent. Grief researchers have actually have a name for this one too. It's linking objects, and it's an object that carries the relationship inside it. it's not about holding on to pain. It's about grieving the bond of, a physical home when that person themselves can't be home that night right now. And for me, for example, like tonight, I've got my tea, and this is, my daughter and I had twin teacups, and I bought one weekend when I was down at the ocean. And so tonight I'm basically like having tea with my daughter and using and thinking it and honoring her, and recognizing and honoring her boundary, but still honoring the absence of her as well. And so then the final one that we've got here is that don't be afraid to talk about them. This is one that a lot of people will skip because, they might think that it hurts more, not less. But bonds that stay completely private tend to isolate you even further. When we learn and practice to say it out loud to a safe person, that's what turns a private ache into something that you're not carrying entirely alone anymore. So I know that this can be one that's really, really difficult, but I do encourage you, share the things that you really love about that person. And this isn't something that you want to just go out all over the place. Like I said, it's something you want that safe space. So what about you guys in the chat? What's one way that you might honor somebody that you can't reach? We'd love to hear your guys' ideas. So tonight we're going to do something a little bit differently. Normally we have the quote a lot closer to the end, but we really felt tonight with this topic that it belonged here. Before we open up the stage for if anybody wants to join us, I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart by E.E. Cummings. Now,
he also wanted to say, he also wrote, this is a love poem, not a grief poem. Mm-hmm. But there's a line in it that says, wherever I go, you go too. So he wasn't writing about distance or separation. He was writing about a kind of presence that doesn't depend on someone standing there right next to you.
Yeah.
Just want to throw that in.
Thank you. So that's what the whole thing that we've been building towards tonight, that you may not be able to have them close physically. So we have to redefine the terms. The relationship doesn't live in the contact. It lives in the way that we carry it.
So if you would, take a breath with us for a second, before we keep going. What we went over, it was a lot. We know that, to sit with, to absorb. So thank you for being here for that. Appreciate you.
Yeah, definitely. So now it's your turn. If you would like to come up on the stage and share, I'm going to get the link so that you guys can come on.
And we know, that coming on stage after an episode like this is could be a bigger ask than usual. And we know that. Maybe it's just one thing that landed for you tonight.
Yeah, I want to go back to, so unfortunately Linda had to step away, but John said that it would be like a memorial of the person. That's the way that he would do it, and possibly even send a card. So that's, I had mentioned on the slide before, I actually started a journal. The journal that I started for my daughter was more about like, these would be the things that I would share with you, that I would have wanted to share with you. And the other thing in that journal, though, is not about finding fault with anything. It's about building the relationship. It's not about any arguments. It's not about disbeliefs. It's not trying to convince any of that. It's about what's important in that relationship. And that's So that's really important if we choose to do something like that too. Is, this should be about healing relationships, not about who's right or wrong, about how we were raised, or even the rules and laws and stuff like that we were held to.
Well, you're so right about that, Shannon. Blame doesn't fix anything. Pointing fingers, it just adds to the pain.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have any resolution on the end of blame. Whether you're pointing your finger at someone else or yourself, it doesn't resolve the issues. It just it expands it. Oh,
one of the biggest challenges when you do go through something like this, and if by chance you do end up coming back together, is peeling back the impact of what the indoctrination may have done to you, and how it may have impacted the relationship. And so bringing those relationships back together and learning a whole new style and way of communication can be a challenge, but it also can be a very beautiful thing. I know, like with John and I, when we got in, we've always had a good relationship, but when we got into the coaching and went through it ourselves and started using some of the tools and techniques that we have got, it just took our relationship to a whole new level, we had conversations that we had never had before, that had depth, that just that weren't there. Would you agree, Mr. Briggs?
Most definitely, yes. I would agree. It expanded our minds, and it created a level of just a different vibration, between us, you could say. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I think too, because we had more appreciation for the conversation and for the things that we were talking about, instead of like having that restriction of, even like if we use just something as simple as, I'm the husband, you're the wife kind of thing, even that restriction, but being able to have deeper conversations where we were allowed to like really figure out what we were thinking and what made sense to us, and be able to have that ability to do that without attacking one another, and being able to and I think even like when a lot of times when you're first waking up and not knowing what you believe anymore, do you believe in God, do you believe in Jesus, do you believe in the Bible, do you not, all of that kind of stuff, being able to have that enough space to be able to have those conversations without being attacked for what you're trying to figure out.
Yeah, it helped give us the courage to step out of the box and ask these questions, and know that the other person wouldn't freak out because of it, or have a negative reaction, so to speak, and even whether they agreed with you or not.
Yeah.
No.
And Natalie shared that her mother had dementia, and that she had mourned her over and over as she declined, and that she was a witness when she had passed away. I'm so sorry for your loss. And I lost my dad to dementia as well. So it was definitely difficult, especially he was a strong person, for many, many years. And then to have some of the things that he would think in those last days, it was tough. Alrighty. So if anybody decides that they do want to come up on stage, too, we'll keep going, but feel free to click the button if there's something that you decide that you want to share. So we continue the conversation after these episodes. And so we present, 5 questions that are related to this topic tonight, and we continue it in our private Exit Generation Facebook group.
Yeah, and here's why that matters specifically after a night like we've had tonight. A question that you sit with alone in your own head can stay stuck there for quite some time, and when you say it out loud in a room full of people who've carried similar experiences along their journey, that question gets room to move. It gives it somewhere to breathe.
Yep. So if you've never joined us, we introduce these questions and answer them individually, if you're comfortable to do that. And every time that we do this, we end up actually even learning more about ourselves as well as one another. And, somebody, as they're answering that question, may say one thing that cracks something open for somebody else. And these conversations are always inspirational and always, I love them. I love to see what ends up coming up for people, especially when you get to, because if you think about going back to where we were doing the stupid study articles that we used to do, we never got to do that. We never got to go, what does this mean to me? How do I think about this?
I know, right? It was such an echo chamber. No questions allowed.
Yeah.
All the same mindset. So yeah, like Shannon mentioned, the X Generation tomorrow night, Mondays at 4, that is Pacific time, 7 Eastern. And you can search for us on Facebook or find the link in the description in the pinned comment as well. I'll try to join tomorrow if I can.
Okay, that'd be great. That would be great to have you. So when John and I first got into coaching, we listened to our own coaches tell different stories. They have huge impacts and real vulnerability. And we would just sit there in awe. How do they do that? How can they tell something that hard without re-experiencing that trauma every single time that they say it out loud?
So next week, we're going to touch on exactly that, aren't we, Shannon?
Yeah, because, sharing your story is actually part of the healing, but not every room is safe and not every conversation actually leaves you feeling better.
Right. And we'll get into choosing when, where, and with whom you process. So that's talking about your experience builds you and others up instead of pulling you back under the surface, so to speak.
Yeah, because I know that, as I've told many aspects of my personal story, and just like that, being in those conversations or those rooms where I felt like crap afterwards, so there's some things that we can do to kind of help us with that, because your story also deserves a safe container. So we'd love to have you guys come back and see what you think of it and see what opens up for you.
Okay, so that's what we got for you tonight. Appreciate everyone for showing up and being here.
Yeah, that matters a lot. And also, as always, I'll thank you for trusting this space with whatever you carried in with you tonight.
And again, as always, if tonight helped you in any way, please go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming up next.
Yep. And if you want to find us at the exitgeneration.org, you can learn more about me and John. You can learn about some of the different things that we're wanting to do with this movement. And if you'd like to support the show directly, you can do that at ko-fi.com/Deservingly You.
Thank you all again. Appreciate you. See you next week.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.